Welcome everyone, my name is Rigel and today I'm gonna do a recap of the round of 32 of the FIFA World Cup 2026. Now, no, I didn't do a recap of match day 3, but I'm not gonna go back and do that now, even though there were some really dramatic games like, Austria versus Algeria. I just don't have the time for that anymore, and the round of 32 happened more recently, so I'm going to do a recap of that instead. And this might be the last video I'm going to be doing of the World Cup because too much stuff is happening all at once, and unfortunately I'm just not at that level of content output. Eurovision is just 3 shows. I can do a whole recap of just those 3 shows, but there's so much happening at the World Cup with each match that I couldn't possibly cover every single thing down to the quarterfinals, semifinals, everything like that. If you want someone that can do that, go watch someone else. I'm just doing this for fun. At no extra pay for myself or anything like that. So yeah, I'm gonna be recapping the round of 32 here. This is being recorded before the match of Norway versus Brazil and before the match of Mexico versus England, so whatever I say here might be out of date by the time this video comes out, which will almost certainly be after those 2 matches. So yeah, just keeping that in mind, let's get into our first match, which is of course Canada 1, South Africa 0. Okay, I said I wasn't going to cover the group stage match day 3 games, but I couldn't resist talking about the very last match, which I'm so glad that I stayed up to watch, and that is of course Algeria 3, Austria 3. It ended at noon my time, bearing in mind that I had already stayed up all night watching the previous matches. I was late to this, having gone to take a shower, but I arrived I think shortly before Mahrez scored his first goal. But before we even start the match, let's kind of talk about the stakes at hand here. The people of not 2 but 3 nations will be watching this, because if either side loses, Iran qualifies for the knockouts via the ranking of the 3rd place teams, since neither loser would be able to get in on goal difference. If Algeria and Austria play to a draw, then Iran was out and Algeria would be higher up in the 3rd place table with 4 points. There's an additional historical factor here because I talked about the disgrace of Gijón in a previous video, where West Germany and Austria played in the 1982 World Cup to a specific result, so that both sides would qualify to the next round and Algeria would be eliminated, so there's definitely a sense of vengeance here for Algeria. But some Algerians didn't want their team to beat Austria either, because while that would eliminate Austria, it also meant that Algeria would face Spain in the round of 32, whereas if they played to a draw, then Austria would have to face Spain and Algeria would face Switzerland, which is definitely an opponent more within reach. Bearing all of that in mind, let's get into the match. And watching back the highlights, and yeah, Ben Bot is just not very good, is he? Petkovic really went, you thought Lucas Zidane was bad. What if I told you I didn't bring a single competent goalkeeper? Maza also had a couple of shots. Shaibi had a shot bounce off of the goalpost. But Belgali's goal is a brilliant solo goal. He dribbled past 2 or 3 defenders to put it in the back of the net. Really, both of Austria's first 2 goals came off of Ben Bot just being terrible, but we arrive at the 60th minute where Mahrez equalizes, and at this point you're thinking, okay, you've got a draw, maybe just keep it that way, despite the surprising attacking intensity that we started with, and Algeria did exactly that, and of course it's just after I tuned in that Petkovic subs off 3 guys, and the Algerian backline proceeds to just idly pass around the ball for 20 straight minutes. The Austrians were happy to let them have the ball as well and didn't really press. I imagine Ben Bot and Schlager started falling asleep. But all of a sudden, in the 93rd minute, a ball goes forward into the Austrian half. It reaches Aouar, who makes a quick pass to Mahrez, and he scores. I think the Austrians were just completely caught off guard, and they suddenly went from a nice, slow training session to Austria being completely eliminated from the World Cup, while Iran would progress. 2 minutes later, Rangnick makes his final sub for the match and puts on Sasha Kalajic, and in his first touch of the ball, off of a header from Gregoric, Kalajic scores, and it's back to 3-3, and Iran is once again eliminated. It is an utterly insane sequence of events, and I saw comments that even the Algerians in the stadium were celebrating that goal from Kalajic because that would mean Algeria gets Switzerland instead of Spain. Oh, and some people were saying that Algeria let Austria score on them? Nah. Benbot is just trash. I definitely feel for the Iranians though, having had so much misfortune and frankly mistreatment at this World Cup both on and off the pitch, but if you could have beaten New Zealand then you wouldn't have needed to watch this final match like a hawk to pray to have a chance at progressing. Regardless, one of the craziest matches that I've watched in real time, it's up there with Morocco versus Senegal at the AFCON final. And even though both sides here ended up being eliminated in the next round, it's just another insight into how dramatic the World Cup can be, especially when real stakes are on the line. And we start with this Canada 1 South Africa 0 result, and to me Canada always seemed like the superior side, but as always they were struggling to finish their chances. I thought Oluwaseyi didn't do much, Jonathan David wasn't super effective either, but then up stepped the man, the myth, the legend, Alphonso Davies himself, and immediately you could feel a vibe shift. He wasn't at his best, but he made the South Africans aware of his presence, and perhaps because they were too busy marking him, it left space for Eustáquio, some guys on the squad actually call him Stacks, to score an unbelievable goal to give Canada their first ever knockout win at a World Cup. No matter what happens next, and we know what happened next, this is a success for Canadian soccer. From the South African perspective, I think they just got outclassed. Not by a significant margin, but they just really didn't generate many big chances in the match. I mean, 0.14 XG, the numbers don't lie. A great showing from Ronald Williams though. Next up, we have Brazil 2, Japan 1. Now, this was hyped up as one of the key cinema matches, and it certainly didn't disappoint. I'll be honest and say that I didn't get home in time to watch the first half, although I did watch the highlight where Sano scored a screamer from outside of the box. But the sense I get was that Brazil was just somewhat lethargic in the first half. Casemiro especially just not nearly as agile as he used to be, but in the second half he proved to be a bit more useful, scoring a header goal off of a set piece. It remained tight after that, with Zion Suzuki putting in a lot of work in goal for Japan, but the later sub Martinelli took advantage of a good pass from Bruno Guimaraes, takes a slightly sloppy touch, but he shoots near post which deflects into the net, and that's the game. Brazil not necessarily showing their best side this match, and they're gonna have to do that to have an edge over their opponent in the round of 16. As for Japan, well, they fought hard, but someone has to get eliminated here. All told, I am surprised that this ended within regulation time though. And then we have what is probably one of the biggest shocks of this round. Paraguay won, Germany won, Germany out on penalties. I mean, who can the Germans really blame but themselves? Much fuss has been made over that call, the disallowed goal due to Anton wrapping his arms around Orlando Gil. We could debate about that all day long, and for what it's worth, I do think it's a foul since it prevents the goalkeeper from being able to stand back up properly to go for the save. But we wouldn't even need to be debating this stuff if you could put away a few more of your chances. This is probably the biggest shock result of the round, but you can't really say Germany didn't have it coming for them. If they had somehow advanced and played the same way against France, they would have gotten smacked up 3-0. Julio Enciso's goal was definitely very much against the run of play, but you see what happens when you just slip up a little bit? Havertz equalizes with the slightest of touches from a pass from Florian Wirtz, but all things considered, Paraguay played their defensive game very well here on out, and Jonathan Tah's penalty probably flew even higher than Gabriel's attempt in the Champions League final, and that's Germany eliminated in the round of 32. Julian Nagelsmann is out now, and Jurgen Klopp has taken over, so let's see what he can do with the German national team going forward. A massive success for Paraguay though, for sure. Nobody would have expected them to advance over Germany. Then we had Morocco 1, Netherlands 1, Netherlands eliminated on penalties. This was a cagey affair, but it was relatively uneventful in the first half other than a few saves from Verbruggen. Morocco always seemed like the better side though, and Gakpo's scoring felt kind of against the run of play. Bunu runs out of the net too far, Somerville went down, but Gakpo sees the ball and puts it in the back of the net perfectly. After all the sorrow he had to suffer after his partner's miscarriage earlier in the week, I'm glad that it was him who scored, but in stoppage time, Diop, who only recently switched allegiances from France to Morocco, puts a header into the back of the net and they go into extra time where again Morocco looks like the side with the upper hand. No goals in that time though, and it's Saibari who scores the winning penalty and Morocco advances to the next round. At least Hakimi didn't score, so that's always a plus. The Dutch will definitely feel disappointed at their performance, but I thought Somerville did great the whole tournament, and obviously Verbruggen made some great saves as well. I think Ronald Koeman is out, and God knows who's going to take the job next. Moving on, we had Norway 2, Ivory Coast 1. Now, this was a very close game, all things considered, which is what I wanted. I supported both teams, so it would be bad if one of them got destroyed by the other, whoever came out on top. The first goal from Nusa is just insane, though. The ball comes in from Odegaard out wide, Nusa takes the ball, dribbles past 2 or 3 defenders, finds an angle, and just curls it in beautifully into the far corner. What a baller. Not to be outdone though, Amad Diallo had a screamer of his own, doing a 1-2 past several Norwegian defenders on his own and just banging it into the net. And in this game in particular, I thought Amad Diallo probably played better than Yan Diomande overall. Ironically, Holland's goal was probably the least flashy of the three, but it demonstrated some excellent teamwork. A brilliant pass in from Oscar Bob goes to Patrick Berg, who finds Holland perfectly. Holland, who's got bucket loads of space since he's not being marked at all, and the goalkeeper is away from the goal. He barely even gets a toe in the ball, but it goes into the back of the net nonetheless. Not one of his more technically demanding goals, but a goal is a goal. He's now scored in every single World Cup match that he has played in, and there was a late free kick for Amad Diallo to take, but Neelan makes a brilliant save, and that's really the game. Man of the match for me, some people would say Nusa for the goal, but honestly, I've got Patrick Berg, and FODMOB seems to agree as well. He made some incredible runs forward, and the multiple crosses and assists to Holland, just absolutely balling out this game. And you know, I love Jens Petter Hauge, but Berg is just far and out the best Bodo Glimt player for the Norwegian national team. In any case, we march on, and next up, Norway faces Brazil in the round of 16. That's going to be a good game, no matter who comes out on top. Then we had France 3, Sweden 0. Now, I fell asleep during halftime, so I can't really comment on what I didn't see, but there were some early chances for France that were either offside or just off, like a good pass from Elise to Mbappe, whose goal was just ruled offside, and then a bicycle kick from Elise himself that hit the goalpost. Mbappe does eventually find a breakthrough, though, just before halftime, adding 2 more goals in the second half. At the end of the day, if it weren't for a masterclass from Zetterström, the Swedish goalkeeper, it could have been more. The Swedish defense is just ultimately not very good, and France just kind of breezed past them. Very quickly on the Paraguay match, since it already happened, I feel like even without the penalty, France probably would have come out on top despite the shenanigans and 3 million fouls that weren't called by the ref. I was watching it on a smaller screen and I got so bored that I started playing games on my laptop. I honestly probably would have rooted for Paraguay to make the upset, but looking at how they've played, I'm honestly glad the match ended at 90 minutes. Moving on to Mexico 2, Ecuador 0. I think going into this, many people had it as a 50-50 since both sides had really good defenses and neither side is realistically going to pull you into a shootout, right? Well, all told, this really wasn't even close. 2 goals from Quiñones and Jimenez in the first half for Mexico, which the last time Ecuador conceded more than 1 goal in the first half, you have to go back to 2024 for that. Granted, there weren't any more goals in the second half, although I think Gilberto Mora, we'll get back to him, he tried a shot from the edge of the box which went wide, but Mexico keeps a clean sheet for the 4th World Cup match in a row now, and if you watch the highlights for the match, it is basically an endless barrage of attacks from Mexico, and then 2 attempts from Yeboah that weren't too bad, and this is just the power of the Aztecas. isn't it? Yeboah is probably the man of the match for Ecuador since, Ener Valencia is washed. Ngapié was terrible all tournament and got sent off at the end for covering his mouth. And Moises Caicedo didn't do much either, although he did give us a legendary reaction image where Quinones puts a finger to his own lips in front of Caicedo, and if you watch the full clip, you'll see that prior to doing this, he also said to him, "Cállate," which means shut up in Spanish. But other than that, Ecuador didn't really do much in this time. Gilberto Mora was running circles around the Ecuadorians, making great passes and runs in the attack, and looking ahead, the Mexicans will absolutely be feeling good about their chances. England is definitely going to be their hardest opponent by far, but they've got the power of the Estadio Azteca behind them and an utterly unbelievable atmosphere in Mexico City. But speaking of England, we move on to England 2, DR Congo 1, and this was probably a far cagier affair than the English would have liked. According to the England fans themselves, not me, England played poorly for the first 70 minutes or so. That early goal from Sipenga certainly didn't help things, and there's an argument to be made that if Harry Kane wasn't there, they could have lost to Congo, which says a lot. DR Congo defended very valiantly. Special shout out to Lionel Mpasi, the goalkeeper who surely must be getting offers from bigger clubs at this point. And even though they weren't generating many attacking chances in the second half, they can be proud of the performance here against one of the footballing giants, and they'll definitely have the faith and belief that they can have a better run next time at the World Cup. Aaron Wan-Bissaka as well, I thought was great in the tournament. Funnily enough, he could have played for England since he's English-born, but he chose the country of his heritage, and he's done a fabulous job in defense, having not been dribbled past even once the entire tournament. And even in this game, he had a proper shot on target, but it bounced off of the post. Yohan Wissa in the previous matches as well was good. Yeah, these guys are not here to mess around. I wouldn't call this match a disaster class for Jordan Pickford, but of the two goalkeepers in this match, he definitely wasn't the one that came out on top. But for Mexico, Raul Jimenez and Julian Quinones are in the form of their lives right now, and if Congo can generate genuine chances against England, who says Mexico can't do the same? Obviously, England are still going into this match as favorites, but even if we discount the whole altitude thing, I don't think it's unfair to say that Mexico can beat England. But we wait and see. It's going to be a game for the history books. Moving on, we had Belgium 3, Senegal 2, and this has got to be the most disappointing African performance in the round of 32. Sure, Cape Verde and DR Congo were eliminated, but they punched up and they fought to the end. Sure, Cote d'Ivoire was eliminated, but they equalized and they gave the Norwegians a genuinely difficult match. How do you, as recent AFCON finalists, manage to bottle a 2-goal lead against a Belgian side that wasn't even that good? And this time you don't even have a Koulibaly to blame since he didn't play the match at all. Almost all of the blame has to go to Pop Cha really, the Senegalese coach, probably soon to be ex-coach. Just horrific game management. In the 95th minute, how are you subbing on Bara Njai, who had one cap for Senegal prior to this and didn't play in any of the matches in the group stage? I will say the first goal was good. Diarra capitalizes off of a deflection and the fact that Courtois was still on the ground to score. But the second goal for Senegal is the stuff of legends. Niakate just puts in a ridiculous pass. Ismail Sarr takes the perfect touch, beats two defenders, and puts it in the back of the net. Ridiculous stuff, which is unfortunately overshadowed by how they just fell off near the end of regulation time. A lot of the African teams at this World Cup, minus Morocco, have this thing of conceding in the last 10 minutes of the 90, and in Senegal's case, twice. In fairness, that Lukaku goal is kind of hard to defend against, but the mess with Tielemans just could have been defended against so easily. I don't want to put all of the blame on Zhao, the backup Senegalese goalkeeper, after Edouard Mendy got injured, but he did completely misread the ball here. But even then, as we headed into extra time, Senegal could have done something, or even so much as hang on for dear life and get to the penalty shootout, but they just had to concede that penalty, and at that point the game was done. By far the biggest bottle job at this World Cup, and it leaves me with nothing but disappointment. I mean, credit where it's due. Lukaku and I think Luke Bakio really made a difference. You know, Rudy Garcia really took a gamble when he subbed off KDB and Doku early in the second half, but ultimately I think it's that grit, that will to live that gave the Belgians the edge despite not really having had a good game. And if matches have to be decided on things as minute as mindsets, then so be it. Belgium and Rudy Garcia live to see another day, and Senegalese folks will feel like their campaign and their thunderous victory against Iraq will have all been for nothing. Next up, we have USA 2, Bosnia 0, which is a pretty routine and expected result, all things considered. But of course, Bosnia tried their best to make things difficult, make things physical. Not quite Paraguay level, but it's close. Some people thought that this reminded them of a classic intra-CONCACAF match. Regardless, Bosnia defended valiantly, and after a goal that was ruled offside for Balogun, he did finally manage to put another one in the back of the net legally this time, although shortly after the start of the second half, he was sent off with a red card for scraping a Bosnian player's leg or something like that. I don't have too many thoughts on the matter because I frankly don't know the rules well enough, but I will say it's not about intent. Rabona TV, in his recap of the match, quoted the exact rule that concerns offenses like this, and nowhere in that rule does it mention whether the player intended to make that challenge, it's just whether it does happen. So yes, it sucks, but he didn't know where he was stepping is not a valid rebuttal to this. What is a valid rebuttal is all of the other times similar offenses have been made during this World Cup, but it wasn't called for a red. That's fine. But again, intent is not part of the rule. Anyways, the USMNT trudge on with 10 men. I think Pulisic gets a goal that is ruled offside, but eventually Malik Tillman does send in a ridiculously good free kick, I think from outside of the box, and that's the game. USA wins, as expected, and Bosnia are honestly probably lucky to have gotten to the knockouts to begin with, but they've got great potential. Guys like Alajbegovic and Baratarovic are really integrating well into the team with veterans like Edin Dzeko, and in time, maybe they'll be the next Croatia. For the US, meanwhile, we just got news that Balogun might have had his suspension suspended. I don't know how that works. Maybe Trump made a call or something. But to be fair, they also suspended Ronaldo's red card for the World Cup as well, so I guess it's just something they can do. It's news fresh off the press, so I haven't been able to read a lot of the reactions just yet. No doubt a lot of people will say this is favoritism for the US though, which I can't say is unfair. We'll see what happens on the day versus Belgium. Next up, we have Spain 3, Austria 0. Unfortunately, Nico Williams seems to be out for the rest of the tournament, but it seems like the rest of the Spanish national team is really finding their stride right about now. 2 goals from Oyarzabal, although it seems like the Austrian defenders kind of just gave up at that last one. Schlager putting in some work to make the scoreline a bit more palatable, but this was, in the end, always the expected result, and the Spaniards will feel good going into their next match. Keep an eye out for Kalajic though, Sasha Kalajic. Maybe once Arnautovic retires, Kalajic can become the sort of marquee Balkan Austrian striker going forward. Overall, not a bad showing for Austria, and there's no shame being eliminated by Spain, is there? Then we move on to Portugal 2, Croatia 1, and I think it's safe to say that this was the most controversial match of the round of 32. The first half was relatively uneventful, but early on in the second half, a ball comes out perfectly to Perisic. The keeper comes out to block it, but he just nutmegs the keeper, and just like that, Croatia are up 1-0. Then we got 2 offside goals, one for Croatia and one for Ronaldo, but then Portugal gets rewarded a penalty, and who else but Cristiano Ronaldo to take it to score his first ever knockout goal. Still no goals from open play though. Sucic then breaks away from the Portuguese defenders and scores, only for that to be called offside as well. But then in stoppage time, a pass from the side from Rafael Leao reaches Gonzalo Ramos, and he heads it into the net even despite 2 defenders surrounding him. And you thought that was the game, but then in what was surely the last kick of the game, a ball comes in, Pasalic takes a touch, and Gvardiol scores. All of the Croatians are celebrating, but then they go to VAR, and they find that the ball had touched the hair, not even the head, of Matanovic before reaching Pasalic, therefore making the goal offside. I mean, I think it's ridiculous. The ball doesn't change direction by any tangible amount. If anything, it's the fact that it touches the back of, I think, Renato Vega that really puts it in Pasalic's path. And heck, even just in the spirit of the game, I would have personally waved it off. But I guess rules are rules, and it is through a last-minute disallowed goal that Croatia is officially eliminated from the World Cup, and Luka Modric plays what is most likely his last ever World Cup match, having watched his country exit at the round of 32. Harsh for sure, but like with Germany, it should have never come to arguing the validity of a VAR call to determine a result of a match. If you had the talent to finish the game properly, then you should have relied on that to nip it in the bud than to argue whether the touch of a hair counted as actual contact. But we move on to the next round, where we've got the Iberian Peninsula derby between Portugal and Spain, and that's going to be a juicy game. We continue on with Switzerland 2, Algeria 0, which is a match that I didn't watch, but the feeling I get is that Algeria just weren't very good in this match. And one of the most common names I heard coming up time and again was Zerouki, who wasn't good in the previous Algerian matches, but kept getting the go-ahead from Petkovic to start in the starting 11. Contrast this with Switzerland's Murat Yakin, who figured out during the group stage that it was a good idea to start Manzambi and Ruben Vargas, and sure enough, Manzambi makes a great run in the run-up to the first goal, which is effectively just a tap-in for Mbolo. The second goal is off of a poor clearance from Belgali, which lands straight in the path of Dan Ndoye, and that's really the game. Near the end, there's a literal empty net for Reeder to score, but somehow he screws it up. But my understanding is that one of the top performers for Switzerland in this match was actually Zakaria, which isn't a name that I'd heard going around too much in the last few Swiss matches. But an emphatic victory for Switzerland regardless, and their first knockout victory as well. As for Algeria, well, things need to change, and they need to change fast. Too much of the old guard is still there, and it really benefits no one. Ibrahim Maza can only do so much on his own, especially when he's played out of position. I think Petkovic has resigned, but no one's exactly eyeing up this rather undesirable job at the moment. Next up, we have Egypt 1, Australia 1, Australia out on penalties. And Popovic's weird personnel choices strike again, and this time it's the goalkeeper. Look, Patrick Beach is certainly untested at an international level as regards penalty shootouts, but in this game alone, he already made a massive save from a really good header from Rabia. I'll be honest though, even though I missed the Ashore goal, I watched most of the match and I couldn't really tell you much about it. There was this wide open chance for Marmoush that he somehow missed, and had Egypt been eliminated, then that miss would have probably haunted him for ages. Hani went down injured for a bit and he looked completely knocked out, and some people think he got a concussion, but he got up and insisted on playing, which resulted in him taking the rather unenviable title of the first ever player at the World Cup to have multiple own goals. This time it's off of a set piece for Australia, and you've got the ever-threatening presence of Harry Sutar rising up, but it ends up being Hani who scores the goal. Then we had Rabia and Patrick Beach's save, but no more goals were scored at the end of the match, and so we went into penalties, where Popovic opted to sub off Patrick Beach in favor of the longtime goalkeeper Matty Ryan, who plays in Europe. According to some reports, even Matty Ryan himself was surprised by this move, as was Patrick Beach. The thing is, the strategy worked in the 2022 playoff against Peru because Matty Ryan was the one getting subbed off, which speaks volumes as to how much he's trusted to do penalty shootouts. But here he's the one getting subbed on, which is just utterly bizarre. And we got a funny sequence of the Egyptian players watching a Matty Ryan penalty compilation on the laptop that featured Mbappe among others. And that last minute studying clearly paid off, as the Egyptian players scored all 4 of their pens, and Matty Ryan was sent the wrong direction on basically every single one. So once again, Popovic's questionable lineup choices come to bite him on the ass, and Egypt advances to the round of 16 for the first time. And finally, in the round of 32, we had Colombia 1, Ghana 0. I wasn't going to watch this match after the Argentina-Cape Verde spectacle, and I didn't, but my understanding is that this was a dominant performance for Colombia despite the scoreline. Oh, and I'm not covering the Cape Verde match in this video because I did an entire dedicated video for that game alone, link in the description. But for this match, this was just attack after attack for Colombia, and any offense that Ghana might have had either went massively wide or was so weak that the Colombian goalkeeper saved it with ease. The scoreline honestly flatters Ghana quite a bit if it weren't for Atizigi, the Ghanaian goalkeeper, putting on a masterclass. It could have been 3-0 or 4-0, but the scoring started early in the match with John Arias putting in a beautiful shot. Later, Luis Diaz would get a shot in of his own, but it was offside. But the Colombians kept pushing and pushing to no avail in the end, but Ghana had less than nothing going the other way, so they didn't really need to stress about it after all. Colombia moves on to the next round, and they'll definitely be feeling good going against Switzerland. And that is going to do it for my recap of the round of 32. Very quickly though, before I end the video, I'm going to take a look at the round of 16 matches that have already happened. This part is entirely unscripted, so whatever comes out of my head right now, you're going to get, starting with France 1, Paraguay 0, and this was definitely a grueling affair. And I think Paraguay were trying just to play as physically as possible and try to get it into extra time and then penalties. Unfortunately, they kind of got into their head a little bit because they were fouling players all over the place, and no yellow cards were being given by the ref. But they just got a little too into their head and got a little too physical and ended up conceding a penalty to France. And honestly, I was cheering for France initially. I was cheering for Paraguay initially, but after seeing what they were playing in the 90 minutes, I was very glad that it was going to end within the 90 minutes. Moving on to Morocco 3, Canada 0. I think it was a pretty routine performance, although my understanding is that this was actually a scoreline that actually kind of disrespects Canada. They put up a big fight. They were really competitive with Morocco in the first half. Again, it's my understanding. I didn't watch the match, as you may be able to tell. But Morocco move on, and they will now face France in the quarterfinal, a rematch of the semifinal of the previous World Cup. And then we move on chronologically over to Norway 2, Brazil 1. And I'm very chuffed about the result, as you can imagine. I'm a Norway supporter, and I think the sense that you get from this match is that Brazil was just wasteful. The choice of getting Bruno Guimaraes to take the penalty as well was also questionable, and Neelan ended up making a fantastic save. Neelan really, I think after Haaland, was probably the man of the match for Norway. He really just showed up here despite not having been that good previously, either for Norway or for club, but he really showed up at this tournament. I think he's a free agent now. He's not really with Sevilla anymore, so maybe some big club could scoop him up. Norway actually, they progressed through 2 late goals, both off of assists from Schelderup, although the assist kind of doesn't matter in the second goal. But I mean, come on, Erling Haaland is just Erling Haaland. He's insane. Also, I would question the decision that Solbakken made of taking off Antonio Nusa at the half, but I definitely agreed with taking off Sorloth in favor of Oscar Bob. Oscar Bob is great, I think, and Sorloth just hasn't really lived up to expectations, I think. But yeah, a win is a win. Brazil is knocked out of the World Cup at the round of 16 for the first time since 1990, I think, and Norway continued their streak of being unbeaten by Brazil, and this Brazilian side has a lot of soul searching to do for sure. Neymar got a consolation prize goal at the end, a consolation penalty, but it wasn't going to realistically change the result of the match, and so Neelan was just happy to let him have it. He was still talking smack to Neelan at the end, so yeah, just not a great look for Neymar coming off of what is probably almost certainly his final match for Brazil in the international level. But Norway move on, and they will face England. And let's move on to that match. England 3, Mexico 2. And I think at some point they just reached their limits, for Mexico, that is. these guys are good, but they are not. They do not have nearly the squad depth that England has, and it really showed, I think, in this match, despite having been hosted in the Estadio Azteca. I think I went in saying there's a genuine chance that Mexico could win, but I still had England as the favorites, and it turned out to be right. But we also saw a Jude Bellingham masterclass, 2 goals in 3 minutes, and then Quinones actually clawed one back, and then Harry Kane became the first ever player to score a penalty and then to concede a penalty. But near the end, you could see, I think, that Javier Aguirre was just starting to run out of ideas, and they just started throwing crosses into the box with really no avail. I thought that Gilberto Mora did well in the first half, but he obviously is a player that just starts running out of steam pretty quickly, so he was taken off at the start of the second half, I think, which I think made sense. And actually, I've just seen news that Liverpool and Arsenal are interested in Gilberto Mora, and he might be going over there in the next year or so. So that could be really exciting. And the reason I say next year or so is because he's 17 right now, and he needs to be 18 to be able to move to Europe, I think. That's my understanding anyway, but that's a really great prospect for Gilberto Mora, and hopefully for the Mexican national team, he can just continue showing up and being a baller that he is. Moving on to Spain 1, Portugal 0, and thank goodness Mikel Merino scored that goal in the 91st minute. I was watching it the second half, really, because I was actually pretty confident that there wouldn't be any goals in the first half, because that was exactly what happened in Portugal versus Croatia. And I was actually off taking a shower in the first half, but I came back and sure enough there weren't any goals. I had the match on in the back, but I really wasn't paying attention to it, and no one was really making anything too threatening. I thought, Lamine Yamal didn't have his best game today. A lot of the players didn't have their best game today. But thank God Mikel Merino put us out of our misery in the 91st minute. And just like that, that is the last dance for Cristiano Ronaldo at the international level. And, some people are like, we're going to stop supporting Portugal now. And, good riddance if you ask me. So Spain progressed to the next round, but so does Belgium, who defeated the USMNT 4-1. I mean, that's just embarrassing, isn't it? Like, Mexico, they fought to the end, right? Canada, despite the scoreline, they also fought to the end. But the US's performance here, as is my understanding, was just embarrassing. Like, all of this talking trash about the other side, all of the things about Balogun's red card being suspended, as in the suspension being suspended, allegedly due to Trump making a call to Infantino, and only then for Balogun to really not even show up at all, even though he started in the match. And I think one perfect encapsulation of this match was the third goal. Just a horrific mistake from the goalkeeper, Matt Fries, and it just ends up in the path of the Cataler, who, by the way, I think is definitely the man of the match for this match for Belgium. The Cataler, he takes the ball off of the goalkeeper, Matt Fries, and sends it into the path of Van Aken, who scores from halfway up the pitch, and that's kind of game. Like, a lot of the players, even though they had such dominant performances against Paraguay, against Australia, against Bosnia, they just didn't show up today. And I wonder how much this whole Balogun political interference incident really affected them, or if it's really just Belgium coming with pure fury in their blood or something like that. But this sets up a quarterfinal. This sets up a quarterfinal where both sides are European, another quarterfinal where both sides are European, and in the bottom quadrant, we're gonna get the results, but we probably won't be getting Europeans from here, to be fair. But yeah, it's still a lot of Europeans in the quarterfinals and in the semifinals, to be fair. But we'll have to see what happens, and we'll have to see if Egypt are somehow able to upset Argentina, and what happens with Colombia and Switzerland, because I think that's kind of 50-50. If anything, it probably favors Colombia. So we'll have to see what happens with those two matches. But these matches that we had here, especially Mexico, England, were absolute madness. Brazil, Norway as well, absolute madness. Whereas on this side, it's a little bit more pedestrian, but people who actually watched the matches might disagree. But yeah, that is about it for this video, for the recap of the round of 32, the recap so far for me of the round of 16, and we look forward to the upcoming matches, and it's going to be absolute cinema. Norway makes their first ever quarterfinal at a World Cup, I think, and they'll be favoring themselves going into the match against England, but England will also be favoring themselves. A lot of historical matchups happening here, and yeah, that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed my commentary. If you did, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my upcoming videos and other content, including watch-alongs for some of these matches, and I'll see you next time.